Oh, hey, we're back. And thank y'all again. Y'all are continuing to show up, continuing to engage, and we're building like a little, like a community here. So I'm gassed, I'm grateful, and forgive my giddiness. It just comes with it, right? So let's jump into it, right? Because I posted my last video just talking about a series of things, and essentially it was an intro to how I wanted to begin this discussion about Miss Nikki. Come to the front, hun. It's your turn. And this is going to be a relatively a thick topic, right? And it's because like I pay attention to a lot of little things. So I will say, you know, precursor. I am a person that is a bit hyper vigilant. I have my own background and experiences that incline me to look at certain things a certain way. So, 1000%, this is just my perspective. A big part of why I started to do psych classes is specifically this thing, right? Because I recognize that I have these sorts of tendencies and they have been helpful, they have been harmful. And I'm always looking for how I can balance myself out. But I also see where there's so much value in it. And I think that it's done me a lot of good in life, right? So, with that being said, we're going to jump in. I'm going to try my best to like keep a cool tone. But you know how I do. Once I start running, I can talk a lot. So, bear with me, but enjoy. And again, thank you for coming. All right. So we're going to get into this Nick thing. And let me preface with the fact that I am not a stan, I am not a Barb. Um, and I would even make the argument that I'm not an actual fan. When Nick got on the scene, there was a certain sort of fan that she's always attracted or brought to the front that I didn't really feel like I related with. She was cool, like she had verses here and there that like absolutely stood out that were super cool, but her fan base had always been a different sort of fan base, right? Like these are the chicks that would come to class and they had the bangs, the mirrors, the combs, and pulling stuff out of their pocket and putting the lotion on and everything else. Like it's all of the shebangs, it's all of the works, and they were a bit extroverted. And y'all know, like extroversion is not necessarily my thing. Um, so while I was a bit more withdrawn and reserved, you had this fan base that was emerging that was a bit more extroverted. And don't get me wrong, not for a minute, like I was a teenager when she showed up. So if that was what was popular, there was a part in spaces and times where I was trying to embrace that, right? Like I had the sewing with the long bang and that sort of thing, right? Um, and I would have some music that I liked, but there was but so much on the diet, but I'm doing donuts and the 6B shit that I was really trying to hear. So again, I want to say that I wasn't ever necessarily a fan, but I was definitely happy for her, rooting for her, because I just felt like it was cool. I always enjoyed, like, I liked the little Kim, right? Like, as much as that might sound wild, like, I thought she was super cool. I like the animated nature of her and stuff like that. So when we had more female rappers, it's like, yo, that's dope as hell. But speaking of Kim, when Nick and Kim came onto the scene, everybody knows the famous fallout, right? At first, I kind of thought that Kim was tripping, right? Because it was very easy back in the 2010 time to kind of paint a narrative and it sticks. So there wasn't a bunch of voices, there wasn't a bunch of faces, there wasn't a bunch of perspectives. It was kind of mainstream. Like, so one person says something and it kind of was the thing that was set. Like marketing very much worked like that. Like there was a specific idea. Like it's not to say that there weren't pockets and spaces where things or alternatives did not come up. It's to say that it's not nearly as big as it is now, right? So I remember listening to Kim on the radio and I thought to myself, I was like, yo, Kim never gave me hater vibes. Like, I never had this impression that she just didn't fuck with nobody. Like, of course, she didn't have people like she was cool. She wasn't like she was cool with some folks, wasn't cool with some folks. She was competitive for sure, but a hater, I didn't quite get that one. It didn't sit with me, but I wasn't really invested. I didn't, care one way or the other. It was kind of like, yo, I don't think less of Kim because Nick is around. Like there was no part of me that was like, oh, fuck little Kim because Nikki is here. That never happened. So I was like, yeah, it's not a big deal. Like let it go, right? Like it came up once or twice. It wasn't significant to me. Then you have her and Rem, right? So you know that saga was pretty short lived. It kind of came to a head. There's a bunch of background on that stuff, but we're not getting into that today. But we know Rem is a battle rapper, right? We at that point. Rem is a battle rapper, Nick is a hit maker. So we can be honest and say that Sheetha was a better diss record. We can say that. Of course, it got pulled and everything else. No Frauds was a cool bop. Like, it was definitely something that we enjoyed, and me and my brother would have this conversation all the time. It's like, yeah, Rem won that battle, but Nick won that war because she was again the hit maker. It was a status thing. So it was like, I get it. And now we work through all of those things and we get to the emergence of Cardi B. So when Nick and Cardi had their opportunity to get on the song together, I was gassed. I was like, okay, like we got something going on here. And I'm going to also emphasize that I was really excited at the fact that Cardi didn't get lost on the track. Like, I remember listening to that. I was like, no, Nick wanna be my ex, right? And I'm like, oh shit. I really liked what was happening. And I thought that it was one of those really cool things. And I was never a person that didn't believe that these two women could exist at the same time. I didn't believe that it was any such thing as a bunch of people couldn't be super talented and exist at the same time. That was never my thing. There's enough for everybody, more or less, right? And I said this before and I'm gonna say it again. I did not believe in Cardi. Again, I'm going to, because I think that this is important in telling this story, okay? I definitely did not expect her to become the entertainer that she has become. Uh, she's a rapper, she's an artist, and we got to just take a minute to acknowledge that a person that puts out an album and every single song on the album is certified platinum, that is that's a legend. You can't act like that doesn't mean anything. So, with that being said, I like Cardi and I like what she showed and proved, and I like her style. So it was fun, and I was just like, again, I enjoy who she is and that sort of thing. But this is when the comparison between Cardi and Nick became very face fronting for me. I was at work one day, and I think that Cardi and Bruno Mars have some of the best rap pop collabs out. Like, I absolutely love Finesse. I absolutely love Please Me. But Finesse came out first. And I was like, oh shit. And I remember my coworker, he came up to me and he was like, yo, Nick is about to get replaced. And I'm like, boy, it's not that serious. He was like, nah, you don't understand. They could have asked Nicki and they ain't asked her and they ain't this, they ain't that. I'm like, no need for all of that, right? They can coexist. Shout out Cole, right? Like, it's not a big deal. We don't need to make this a big deal, right? So we get past that. And I want to say that by this point, Nick and Safari had hit, like, I think the height of like the breakup stuff. My timeline could be completely shot because again, this wasn't necessarily my thing. But this aspect of her relationship with Safari falling apart is important. Thumbnail it for later because we'll come back to it. So now we get to 2018, and this is the album release year. So this is the year that Cardi debuts, and this is the year that Nicki drops the Queen album. So Cardi makes her landing, and what made me give her album a chance was I had a 60-something-year-old coworker that came to work one day and was like, little bitch, you can't fuck with me if you wanted to, right? So I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? And it's my bad. And it was the funniest shit to me. So I'm like, all right, let me see what's going on. Because at that point, I'm sitting here saying to myself, like, does she have something or did she get lucky? Right. And understand the significance of this because I am a person that is acknowledging here today as a fan that I was a naysayer. So I go ahead and I look at all her stuff. I listened to her previous mixtapes and I was like, hold on, she might have a little something here. And I watched her old videos and I'm like, I think I like her vision. And you can tell that the difference was that she just has more money now. But again, I was excited for her. I thought she had something special. And I was like, oh shit, bitch, we got another one. I was glad to see it. So Cardi drops her album. I go ahead and I say, I'm going to listen to this album. And when I tell you that that first song came on and it was like, yeah, baby, I like it like, you couldn't tell me nothing about that bitch. Moving forward, she was 1,000% that bitch. And I was invested. But now, because I listened to her album, it made me say, you know what? Let me go listen to Nick's album, right? So later on, when Nick's album comes out, I'm like, I'm going to give it a chance. because by this point, I had not listened to a Nicki Minaj album. I'm just gonna be honest. I did not. Because when I tell you that Cardi's album hit the scene and you talking about these niggas, like I'm driving down the street because it's warm outside. We listening to the album. I got a certain song on, a dude pulls up next to me. He like, yo, what number is the song that you listening to? Because there are dudes running down on me talking about this album. Understand that the hype, the 5 billion streams is not a joke. I'm in the gym and I saw a dude that was squatting 2 and 3 plates. Dead ass looked at his phone and it's the blue and yellow shit. It's this bitch, Cardi, on his phone that he's listening to, squatting. So this is not even something that like, it's not just for the girls. This is something that bridged the gap between male rappers and female rappers in a really special, and I would argue organic kind of way, right? So bad. Now it's time to listen to Queen. So when I go to listen to it, I watch the videos, I listen to the music, and like I said, I've never listened to uh, a Nicki Minaj album up to this point, right? I hated it. I did. I will be honest that the singles did what they were supposed to do, but personally for me, as a body of work, I was like, shit. I think my bro was right. I think they are trying to replace her because I was like, yo, I did not enjoy this at all. Sorry, it's not nice, but I'm telling you how I feel, how I felt at the time, honestly. And we know how this story goes from here. Nikki becomes the female rap bully. We can do a deep dive in that on a separate time, but I don't think we need to. I think there's so much, back and forth and so much hashing out of what she's done with female rappers and who she's become. I don't think you need me, but if you do, just let me know. With that being said, we're gonna get into this spousal thing. It's gonna pick up and it's gonna get interesting, right? So originally she comes in and she's with Safari. Now we know Safari as all of these things. We call him corny and all this other stuff because he done dealt with Erica Mena. We done seen all these different facets of who he is as a person and so on. And we've kind of formulated this ideology of who he is. But when he came onto the scene, she ended their relationship saying that he was her hype man. And despite the writing credits and all that other shit, he was just sound effects. Fine, no problem, right? And I think that because of how he's shown up after their relationship, people kind of accepted that he wasn't as good of a guy as we might have perceived him to be because he had been with her for so long and had stuck by her side and been a support system to her for so long. But again, I digress. So once the Nicki beefing with everybody narrative kind of gets started, I kind of started to look at how people were coming up with these narratives. Like I wanted to see where y'all getting this stuff from because beforehand I just wasn't as invested in like social media. I think I joined social media pretty late, as a matter of fact. Like I just wasn't a part of all of the stuff, like the Vine craze and all that other stuff. Like I missed that whole thing for the most part. Like I was just on standby, like just another dweeb. And that's probably some childhood stuff, but again, I digress. So when I go and I look this stuff up, they have compilation videos of like her violated Safari, right? Where like she jumping on Wayne and doing all of this weird stuff. And she like, what he said? And I was like, oh damn, like she she was kind of rough on bro. Like it's like that's not really nice. But before I get to that video, right? The thing that I mentioned before was that she was talking about the breakup between her and Safari. And I found a video or an interview that she had done. And I think she was doing promo for Queen and she was crying and she was talking about, being with someone for so many years and them not being around no more. And they were such a fixture in their life and all this other stuff. And it really leaned into this breakup narrative. And so this was a big reason why I wanted to also give the Queen album a chance because there was a point in which she had been showing up and showing herself in this different light. So it made me say, maybe her fans are not an actual representation of her. Maybe I am misunderstanding who she is as an artist. Maybe that's me. Maybe it's a me thing, right? Boy, boy, I was wrong. I was wrong. And like, yeah, every year she kind of just reminds me that I like what I thought of her back then was always consistent. But again, we're not here for bashing, right? So we're gonna jump into the next spousal space, and this is when she gets to dealing with Nas. And this was like a 2-week blip, not trying to be funny, but it was very, very short lived. And so after you have that happen, then she goes on to the Meek thing. And I found it real interesting that she went from a nigga like Safari to a nigga like Nas, skipped over Drake, which seemed more consistent, not to be mean, seemed more consistent with the personality type of a Safari type. I'm just saying. And then went over to Meek Mill. And now she's with this unknown, but only known for violence and physical and sexual assaults and stuff. Like her husband now, like Mr. Petty. So I'm like, what the fuck was that about? Like, that's weird as hell. And I think many of us have this question where it's like, why did you do this? First things first, here's my hot take. I think that Nick went ahead and married this guy because she was trying to kind of mirror Cardi's dynamic. It might be childish to many of y'all, but it's one of those hills I'm willing to stand on. I don't know if I would die on it, but yeah, I think that she did it because, think about Cardi when she first came out. And a big part of Cardi's brand was that she was settling down with Offset. And then there was this upswing in both of their images, right? Like the former stripper, the street chick turned rapper mogul, wife, and mom, right? Like it was so hood Cinderella. Like I'm sure you remember 50 Cent talking about it. Like everybody should love Cardi's story, right? And then you have this form Amigos who, like, this is the dude doing do shit, the father of many. He found somebody to settle down with. And, he celebrated marriage. He celebrated fatherhood and he kept his rap career alive. Right. And it kind of takes their past, and instead of their past anchoring them downward, it becomes this catapult and this proof that not only can people change, but people grow and love can be found anywhere. Like this is beautiful. This is the stuff we want to see, right? And with my whole chest, I absolutely believe that Nick looked at that and thought of it as a big part of Cardi's popularity or her uniqueness, and was like, I'm gonna take some of that. I'm gonna take some of that. And when she jumped in and she took that, she didn't understand that Cardi's story was authentic and true and valuable for Cardi. And it was relatable for Cardi. When she decided to do it and she took her story, not only did it not work and it didn't mirror the response that Cardi got, it actually ended up kind of pulling her veil back a little bit. It showed us something that I think she didn't want us to see about her before. Again, this is just my opinion, right? So, do you remember when Nick talked about learning to rap? She was doing one of those.
Remember the first lyrics that you wrote?
Oh, it was such a little stupid little rap. It goes, cookies the name, chocolate chip is the flavor. Suck up my styles like a cherry lifesaver. I was like 11. I wanted to show the girl next door because she was like a good rapper and she thought she was so much better than me. When she left, I went home and I wrote this little rap so I can like show her. And then I rang her bell and I started saying my rap and she just stood there like, but I knew she was just jealous.
He was talking about this older neighbor or something like that. And it was a girl and she wrote this rap and the rap is short or whatever. And she was trying to impress this older girl. And she remembered this girl saying something about not saying anything, as a matter of fact. The girl ain't even acknowledge it. And she was like, I knew the girl was jealous. So even though the question was about her earliest rhyming, there's this undercarriage of her proving herself to someone that thought they were better than her. There is this belief that this person is just jealous. Now, 11-year-olds and a 14-year-old, I would say maybe, right? Like maybe that's the case. But I felt like that was interesting to be still holding on to 30 years later. But let's go a little further, right? I'm a load this up because this is a point in which you realize that there's competition and then there's something else. And people like Nick take on this something else to me. All right. So remember when we talked about beforehand that abusers have a tendency to use your imperfections as justification for mistreatment, right? Like if you wasn't acting like this, I wouldn't have did that. This is going to be important. We also talk about kids being seen and not heard, and that this can lead to ways to cope that can yield addictive qualities. You will be following up with being stuck in stages of grief, because you've never had a chance to intellectualize and process what you've been through, right? And next we have Miss Nicki Petty, who we have found out comes from a home that was riddled with drug addiction and abuse. So we know that Nicki was born in Trinidad, right? And she was partially raised there. She came here when she was a young child. She was probably, I think, 5 or 6 or something like that, I believe is what I saw. And she did this song called Autobiography. And she says, Daddy was a crack fiend, 2 in the morning, had us running down the block like a track team. When you burnt the house down and my mother was in it, how could I forget the pain is infinite? Nightmares of you killing my mother, the reason I sleep with my head under covers, and they should have thrown your book at you because I hate you so much that it burns to look at you. Her pops set their house on fire with the moms in it. And we need to hold on to that for a second because we just talked about literally addiction and grief stages following adversity or trauma. Now imagine this girl that wrote that lyric becoming famous, right? She got all the praise. She got the earnings. She has access to resources in abundance. I couldn't even put words on what that dopamine surge must feel like. The notion of finally being good enough, right? So my thing would be, where does the pain go? Right? There's this whole concept of energy, that energy is not a thing that dies. Energy is a thing that transfers. And so my perception of emotions is that emotions and energy are synonymous. Essentially, in practice, when you have a particular motion, the motion will encourage or bring forward a particular set of actions to make you do and behave in a certain way, right? So because I felt like this is what I decided to do, right? So what happens when the energy or the emotions are filled with abuse, fear, drug addiction, low trust? While I want to believe that when people go through bad things, they say, I really don't ever want to see this kind of life again. And I don't want this type of stuff around me ever again. Some people don't believe that. Some people become the monsters that raised them. Let's take Nick's brother, right? He was convicted for messing with a kid repeatedly, right? Outside of the fact that I can only imagine that sexual abuse may have happened in their childhood home, Nick is now alongside the life of her brother that's being charged with sexual abuse of a child. And she has to make a decision on whether or not she is going to stand behind the only other person that knows what it's like to run up to their house on fire in the morning with their father and mother inside of that burning home, or accept that he is a bad person and did the wrong thing. What do you do? So now let's look at that a bit further. Not only that, imagine your dad leaving this life after doing all of that carnage, moving on to start a new life, and give you a little sister that gets more of the life that you wish you had gotten as a kid. Maybe. Now, let's go a step further, because we're speculating now. And let's dive into what's plausible at this point. Imagine those conversations with her dad after she becomes Nicki motherfucking Minaj, right? Do you think he took full accountability for his actions when they were kids? If he did, could you imagine, like, damn, you looking this old man in his face and he telling you, like, yeah, man, I was messed up. I did this, I did that. And like, I wish I could take it back. I wish I could be better. And could you imagine that there is a little girl in her that's like, I still want my dad. I still want my dad. But I can imagine that she would gaslight herself that maybe I'm seeing this wrong, because you want to believe, you want to love this person because this is your parent, right? Like, this is the person that brought you here, that's responsible for you. But what if he wasn't ready to take responsibility or ownership of that? What if the conversation went more like, baby girl, I know I wasn't perfect, but your mom wasn't perfect either. And it was so hard and I wish I knew more and I wish so that's one way to look at it. Or what about her brother that looked at her and said, nah, sis, y'all would never do that. Yo, you gotta believe me. And I need your help. Because that's the person that knows her best. Like, of course he wouldn't. Like, he can't be a monster. Because that's my brother. Or maybe, like her husband and his 30-year-old T, when he was just a kid. And him and that girl was in a relationship. And that girl wanted it. So now we've learned how to consider the villain's origin story, because it's justification. Like, if this wasn't happening to me, then I wouldn't be in this situation. Like, it's not my fault. Okay. I think that this is when it becomes important for us to recognize that two things can exist at one time. A villain could have a very hard beginning, but that don't mean that they don't choose to be a villain every single day. And they use the justification of it used to be hard for me is why they are a villain every chance they get. So this is a lot, right? And I've been here for a while. So I'm going to punch into this one and I'm going to land this plane. So we're going to pick it up just a little bit and bear with me. All right. So there's so much more stuff that Nick has done that I could look at and I could say that I want to talk about that a little bit more. But again, there's so many people that have covered Nick and her story and her life. I'm sure that they've covered all the bases and I don't want to saturate again or punch down. But let's start with some of my key points. We have Nick migrating from Trinidad to New York. My thoughts on this? When she arrived to the States, she might have had an accent in her early years. And so every person that I knew that grew up in that age group, and we watch it happen all the time, even in the current day, people make fun of people with accents. And if you came to New York during that time, it's a big deal. Like, to the point that I will tell you that my dad used to say, because my parents are not from here. My parents are West Indian. My mom's a Jamaican. My dad's from Trinidad. They have accents. And they was very much focused. My mom not as strong as my dad. My pops talked about this to us. He said, I used to be worried about what y'all would talk like and what kind of accent y'all would have. And I was like, no way. But this is a part of it. When you come here and you're different, there is an expectation that you assimilate to the environment that's around you, right? And you kind of just go undetected. Now, here is the thing. If I imagine that she had an accent when she got here, when she decided to make fun of Megan Thee Stallion's Southern...
What's up, Bomb B? Bomb B or Pimp C? Is your Bomb B, bitch? Is your Pimp C? Oh, your Bomb B. I said, bitch, rapping like a Bomb B and said DP. Rapping like a Bomb B and Pimp C.
You really are a projecting bully. Because if for any reason that my belief that you have experienced this, you thought that it was a good idea to weaponize the way that people have mistreated you onto somebody else because you would rather be a villain, you would rather be an antagonist. And because Megan made you feel a certain type of way, you feel justified that my nervous system is fired up, so I'm going to attack you. We'll thumbnail that. Her spousal choice. I don't believe for a minute that is an accident. She had Safari come around and was in her life, and she's made a lot of conversation around who he was and that his family wasn't right and they were abusive and all of these things. My recollection of what that dynamic looked like, it looked like Safari was the submissive person, but again, I could 1000% be wrong. I'm not saying by any means that he wasn't a bad person or he didn't do foul stuff. I'm saying that the power dynamic was established in my purview, and she looked like the one that had the power in that situation. But again, I could be wrong. But if we go into what her career turned into, as she got older and she became more vulnerable in the rap space, who was she surrounded by? Men. People have called her male-centered, but the version of male-centered that they are talking about rings to me like pick-me vibes. And I don't think that by any means that she's a pick-me. I think that the first man that she's ever known was drug addicted and violent. And it was her pops. So that means she has had the opportunity to see completely untamed strength, and non safety of a man. And I believe that her choice to contend with this, essentially, that she's always been afraid since she realized how dangerous men can get when they aren't, happy, when they aren't okay, when they are under the influence of narcotics, right? Once she had that fear inserted into her, I think that she became a person that made a decision to say, I'd rather be sheep than cattle, where she's like, I am going to embrace, I'm going to befriend, I'm going to hang out with these sorts of people because I know what danger looks like from these sorts of people. And I would rather be on their good side than be in their way. hmm And this is also why when she get good and ready, she will mobilize people that are abusive that she surrounded herself by. Right? This is how come she had her man volunteer. Well, he didn't technically volunteer. She volunteered him to get into the boxing ring with a whole ass athlete for $10 million because she got to prove that she got money and she got a gangster that lay in her bed at night. Now, my final piece, and I think that this is the most sincere one, is the fear of going broke and coming back to whence you came. This one is a tough one, and this is the one that I feel is the most relatable and I empathize with the most because this is, and you know what, I'll even make the statement that I possibly could be projecting my own fears here. But hear me out. One of the hardest things about getting to it is that perpetuating fear that one day you're going to wake up from this reality that you've built, that you've been blessed with, whichever one you decide to call it, and it's all gone. You see, the kid in Nick is arguably still afraid, still grieving the loss of the home that she never got, the inability to save her mom, the inability to save her brother, the resentment that her mother didn't save them or keep them safe, the anger that her pops moved on, and that eventually they still had to figure it out. The kid in her learned very early on the value of charm. You see, because being charming and being seen as the best of something, being the most polished version of yourself, right? This is that, oh, she's such a good girl. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, what does she do? Right? When this is the stuff that gives you the opportunities. You know how we talk about pretty privilege, and I don't like to put pretty privilege in a basket of particular features and attributes, but more of the spirit of attractiveness, right? This is the stuff that gets you the opportunities. This is the stuff that people say, like, bring them here, right? And what happens? She's now conditioned to stay polished, stay kept together, right? And people do things like tell her, you're so perfect, you're so adored, you're so talented, you're so pretty, you're so smart. And it's never simply because you are yourself, because you are kind. It's not about who you are, it's about what you are, right? And this is why you have her saying that Jay-Z needs to pay back his karmic debt because she did everything right. Why is it still hard for her? This is how come Cardi, Meg, Lotto, Doja, Doechii, Remy, JT, Ice Spice, all of them are here to hurt and replace her because this is what happens when you grow up in an abusive environment. You don't have the ability to exist in the middle. You can't look at this kind of situation and say nobody's out to get me because she still sleep with covers over her head because her dad. So there's no way that these women are just actually doing a good job and it's their time to shine. It can't be that. Somebody is doing something to her. Somebody's doing something to me. That's how she feels. Like somebody is doing something because her kid life made her nervous system so sensitive that she can't fathom that is just inaccurate, that what she's feeling is not true. This is what happens, right? All of the charm, all of the resources, all of the adoration, all of the popularity. It becomes a key component of your existence and why you have the things that you have. It's an equation that brings you to the reason that you have love. So, what happens if all of that goes away? She might get stuck in the unprocessed stages of grief, and every once in a while, she'll get in that angry bag and she'll get on Twitter and say some nasty shit to people. Every once in a while, she slips into that denial bag. Them rap girls ain't that talented. Fuck you mean? They ain't doing what I was doing. They'll never be me, right? She gets in that bargaining bag. Because you know, Jay-Z, he still owe me money. You still owe me money. Because, like, didn't I do good things for you? Wasn't I fantastic? That karmic debt, right? Like, don't you owe me? And I only imagine that from time to time, depression creeps. Because depression is not discriminated in any kind of way. Nobody, I don't care what your background is immune to things such as depression. People of faith, people of non-faith, black, white, rich, poor, everybody, millionaires hurt themselves. So I know depression is a thing. And not to mention she smoked a lot of weed. So I imagine that's to keep herself grounded the best way she knows how. And I get it. And like I said, there's so much stuff that I noticed about her. And I imagine her overreacting to like a lot of different things, right? So some time ago, I had a conversation about triggering flight or fight based on the emotion of fear, right? And when you are responding to fear with an emotional fight or an emotional flight, it looks like, for instance, when you go into fight mode, the emotions that you will see will be anger and aggression. And flight, on the other hand, will look something like withdrawal or introversion. So let's say Nick's response of choice is to fight, which is not a bad thing. But when it's emotional, what does that look like? You see, when it starts to get unchecked, like it's starting to spiral, this is when you have the emergence of personality disorders like narcissism, Machiavellianism, borderline disorder, antisocial, right? And even if you aren't diagnosed with these personality disorders, you exhibit the symptoms that would explain why relationshiping with you is so difficult, right? So I think what's the worst part about all of this is what generational curses look like. This stuff grows legs and it just keeps going. Because I can almost bet money that there is a reason that her father became a drug addict. There is a reason that her mother was this imperfect person that stayed in that relationship dealing with abuse. And we are watching her baby sister get on Bad Girls Club trying to figure out how she's going to do it, how she's going to get to it. And nobody has taken a minute to say, what can we do to make this different? So I guess what I'm going to say as a final note is either you are strong enough to change the gang or you become the gang. I'm going to catch y'all later.